Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 14. We are getting so close. This week, we're talking about counseling interracial, multiracial, and multicultural populations. So, our first reading of the week was Going Home, One Orphan's Journey from Chicago to Poland and Back. So, this is a first person chapter about how early labels, things like illegitimate, orphan, Polish, Catholic, can organize a person's identity for decades. The author shows how institutionalization, poverty, and ethnic stigma become intertwined, and how reconstructing one's actual family and ethnic history can be healing. So there's going to be three threads throughout: a personal story, the role of Polish Catholic immigrant culture, and the therapeutic or narrative implications of going home. The author starts by telling us that this very specific shaming label stuck to him. Even after advanced degrees, a career, and parenting, it could flash back and make the present feel unreal. He cites Eileen Simpson's work on adult orphans, how many hide their background because they feel responsible for being institutionalized or fear discrimination. His project is to stop hiding. It's important clinically. You want to disclose itself. Disclosing that part is a part of the healing process. So that label of illegitimate Polish Catholic orphan. Through court records, he learned the placement wasn't because he was unwanted as a person, but because of structural factors: poverty, patriarchal shame, and the medical legal practices of the time. His mother was labeled feeble-minded and sterilized, which was classic eugenic language used on poor immigrant women. So an individual trauma is actually embedded in immigration history, class, and gendered control. That reframing is powerful. It didn't happen because I was bad. It happened because of systems. Sorry, y'all. Okay, hopefully we'll stay here. Yeah, my computer just kind of pooped a little bit. Also, I'm just now realizing that I'm sharing a little too much of my screen. Sorry, y'all. Probably a little bit um, distracting. Okay, let's going back. Sorry. So he lived um, uh, in the orphanage from ages 4 to 17, which is an entire developmental arc. The orphanage functioned like a family: daily care from nuns, ultimate authority in one priest. But he says he wasn't sure it ever felt like home. Home to him would mean someone answers your questions, or a refrigerator you can open without asking. That's a vivid picture of institutional deprivation: material care without full attachment. He explains that for Polish individuals whose country literally disappeared from the map, the church was the carrier of identity. So in the orphanage, Catholicism isn't just religion, it is also ethnic survival. That raises the paradox. The same institution that gave him belonging also transmitted shame about illegitimacy. This is useful when we think about culture as both protective and oppressive at the same time. As an adult, he tried to repair the rupture with his mother, his father, and finally his aunt. Each attempt was partial or rejecting. The most striking part is the priest's letter praising him while calling him a child of shame and disgrace, language from an older Catholic moral world used unreflectively. That shows how stigma can be institutional, not just personal. For someone with an abandoned history, that's a rewounding. A key therapeutic move in this chapter is perspective taking. He realizes the Felician nuns were themselves Polish peasant women with few options. That doesn't erase harm, but it humanizes them and hypnotizes the church's authority. At the same time, reclaiming Polishness connects him to a broader story than the orphan in Chicago. Now he's part of a transatlantic immigration narrative. He says that for institutionalized kids, actual information, things like names, dates, photos, what happened to so and so, becomes the furniture of home. It makes your story three-dimensional. At the reunion, he even discloses his secret relationship with a nun, and the others casually say, "We knew," and they make a joke. That ordinary, pure level response replaces secrecy and shame with shared reality. This is narrative repair happening in community. Now we can generalize. He says abandonment can make all later attachments feel precarious, but that can be subdued by reconnecting past, present, and future. Getting real records, real bodies, real places counters the sense of unreality. He also quotes Simpson: "The US is full of emotional orphans, immigrants who cut off roots. So this isn't just his story, it's a template for clients who feel inexplicably not at home." Then he ends with a really important line: "Nothing can change until it becomes what it is." In other words, you have to tell the truth about abandonment, about institutional abuse, about cultural shame. Once it's named, you can integrate it. His later life, keeping contact with former orphans, welcoming a granddaughter with joy, shows that the orphan story can become one strand, not the whole identity. That's the going home of the title. All right, then our next reading, Hyperlinked Identity, a Generative Resource in a Divisive World. So this is where the author is being pushed by political events in India and in the US to show up as a Muslim. She asks, do I let hostile context define me, or can I define myself through a richer set of stories? Out of that question, she develops the idea of hyperlinked identity, identity as a network, not a box. She says she usually doesn't lead with, "I'm a Muslim," but the current climate in both her home countries is forcing that identity to the front. That's important. Our context can overexpose one identity to the point that it starts to crowd out others. Her question is, how do I respond without letting an oppositional context shrink me? Working in rural India taught her two simultaneous truths. First, whole communities can be held down for generations. Second, when people are treated with dignity, their human spirit wakes up quickly. She also names Jugaad, a low-cost, patch-it-together creativity, as a cultural practice. Keep that in mind because later she treats identity itself as a kind of Jugaad. We make ourselves up with what's available. In the US, she encounters a narrower racial grammar. India had colorism and caste, but not this strict black-white divide. Now she's brown, Muslim, married to a white American man, so she's simultaneously visible and invisible. That experience pushes her to say, my social location is being assigned to me, but that's not the whole of who I am. She appreciates gender analysis, but says it doesn't fully fit me. She's an immigrant from a colonized country in a rising religious fundamentalism context. None of that was centered in the feminist rooms she was in. So she seeks approaches such as Botkin, Anderson's social constructionism that let her step in and out of meaning streams. That's the seed of hyperlinked identity. Here's her core metaphor. Identities are like web pages connected by links. You click according to context. In one room, your Muslim story is foregrounded. In another, your professional story. In another, your immigrant story. None of them is fake. They're all linked. This is different from saying, I have one true self. It's saying my stories get meaning from each other. She's careful here. Sometimes to do anti-racist work in the US, she might downplay immigrant or gender stories. That could look like she's yielding to a dominant frame. She says, no, if I do it consciously, I'm exercising agency. That's differential consciousness. The difference is whether the context erases me or I choose how to show up. She quotes Audre Lorde, the master's tools won't dismantle the master's house. If nationalism is forcing a Muslim versus non-Muslim binary, and we respond only inside that binary, we've already lost. Her move is tell thicker stories. Intersectionality was necessary politically, but if we stop at categories, things like woman, Black, Muslim, we can't connect. Stories rehumanize, labels separate. She brings it back to family therapy. Our questions position people. Where are you from? And where are you a local? Positioned differently. If identity is hyperlinked, then in therapy, we should be curious about the links. What you clicked before you said, I'm anxious. What social discourse is in the background? What community you're answering to? And we should remember the client has a map too. She ends where she began. Nationalist movements try to narrow Muslims. She responds by widening identity. Hyperlinked identity is not chaos. It's an intentional, relational way to stay complex in divisive times. Think of it as an identity jugad, creative, low cost, relational improvising with the stories you already have. That improvisation in itself is resistance. All right. In our third reading of the week, Therapy with Racially and Culturally Intermarried Step Families. So Baptiste has a lens for working with racially and culturally intermarried step families. The key isn't that we need a brand new therapy model. It's that familiar systemic step family work needs precise cultural reading. So throughout this, I want you to notice how ordinary step-family tasks like setting house rules, negotiating roles, or planning holidays take on new meanings when race and culture are in the room. As we go, what I'll try to do is model a bit of a reflexive stance, naming places my own assumptions might color what I see. So a reflexive stance, how your own assumptions influence what you're seeing. So we can practice bracketing rather than imposing. So intermarried step families navigate a double complexity. All the usual step family adjustments plus racial and cultural dynamics. That means the context may look familiar, but the meaning shifts. Here's a quick exercise. Think of the classic different rules between homes. A step family might be coalitions and loyalty bonds. A cultural read might be competing definitions of respect. Put them together and you get compounding stress. Our job is to slow down and ask, what does this behavior mean inside its family's cultural ecology? So here's a small map check. Intermarriage can be interracial, intercultural, interfaith, often overlapping. Intermarried stepfamily adds remarriage and step parenting to the mix. De facto intermarried means partners share a background, but a child does not. Say a white couple raising a biracial child from a prior relationship. De facto cases matter because phenotype, school responses, and extended family treatment can differ child to child. Throughout, treat culture as living practice and history, not a fixed trait list. Baptiste clusters the clinical work into 3 repeating themes. First, building a new family culture, merging rituals, foods, language, holidays, and rules. Second, children's acceptance and identification, belonging, phenotype visibility, loyalty pulls to a non-resident parent and kin. Third, out of awareness stereotypes, the jokes, tones, or labels that leak bias into daily life. You can do a brief enactment here if you want. You can partner up or chat with somebody where you are, where you each name one must keep ritual from your heritage and one must adopt from your partners. So the task is to facilitate a hybrid that feels real, not performative. When someone says it's cultural, we treat that as a hypothesis to test. I'll ask for a concrete episode. Walk me through the last time this happened. When I compare within family differences to within community variation, do your siblings or cousins do it differently? If it's bona fide culture, we honor and bridge it. If culture is masking power anxiety, status loss, or loyalty bonds, we'll name that. Then we intervene in process, strengthen the couple's excessive subsystem, strengthen the couple's executive subsystem and rehearse micro skills, gentle startups, repair attempts, and curiosity questions like, when you say respect, what would that look like on a Wednesday night? Early on, we map the suprasystem, ex-spouses, grandparents, courts, schools, faith communities, immigration and legal context. These systems can support or sabotage. We script 2 boundary messages for kin, a gentle version and a firm one. For example, we value your traditions and will decide household rules together. Your stories and recipes are welcome. Decisions about names, adoption, discipline are ours. With schools, we pre-plan language for teasing or bias. In our family, there are multiple cultures. It's a strength. If comments come up, please loop us in so we can address it together. Remember, kids didn't choose the step-parent, the step-family, or their racial categorization. We normalize ambivalence and protect belonging. A favorite in-session exercise is a heritage board where kids add food, words, holidays from all sides, then we can place it at home where it's seen. So in this way, we externalize stigma. The problem is racism at school, not who you are. And we name phenotype-based differences out loud so children aren't left to make private sense of them. Where possible, we align parenting scripts across households to ease split loyalties. Bias often leaks in tone and microphrases. I'll model warm, direct naming using exact remembered words instead of global accusations. Then we practice a 3-step repair. Impact. When I hear that joke, I feel othered. Meaning check. Did you mean X? Repair. What I wanted to say was. Here, we role play both sides so partners experience initiating and receiving repair. Between sessions, I assign a bias audit, one daily moment where a cultural assumption shaped perception. We bring those back for coached redos. Baptiste's posture blends systems and live enactments. Less lecture, more coached interaction. A simple 45-minute arc here. 10 minutes to join and update. 15 minutes on one live dilemma. 10 minutes of skills and meaning. 10 minutes to plan. And then a 60-second self-check before each session. Where might I impose assumptions? Where might I over-identify? These are questions a therapist is asking themselves. Then they can ask in session, how did my wording land? So the family can correct any fit in real time. All right, so 10 practice guidelines. The first is to audit and bracket your ethnocentrism. Turn every should you feel into a question about meaning or impact. The second is to hold culture and the presenting sequence. Always link the meaning to the moment where the symptom shows up. Third, you offer models of success. Brief stories or alumni visits from functional intermarried stepfamilies can counter deficit narratives. Fourth, you name social pressures or make them explicit. Things like racism, xenophobia, classism. So blame moves outward and advocacy becomes thinkable. Fifth is to validate bona fide differences before negotiating. It makes sense you want an earlier bedtime. If your home structure signaled care, then co-sign a hybrid. All right. Sixth, learn culture from the family. Do a microethnography, proverbs, conflict rituals, how love and respect shows up, and sort what's preferred versus what's negotiable. Seven, guard against partiality. If you notice an alliance with one person who shares your culture, pause and elicit the other's narrative first. Eight, co-therapy can help, so consider that. Pair across race, culture, language when feasible to widen attunement and buffer bias. 9 is to avoid pseudo insight. If its culture ends the inquiry, ask, what's the effect on the child, the couple, the kin ties? Then 10, let family needs steer the goals. Define success in their words. So for example, holidays without blowups, or both sets of grandparents welcome the kids, and leverage strengths you already see. Then some takeaways here. Ultimately, the bottom line is to adapt what we already know about step families with cultural precision and expect to cycle repeatedly through 1, building a shared family structure, 2, protecting children's belonging and identification, and 3, cleaning up out of awareness bias. All right, our final reading of the week, how couples manage interracial and intercultural differences. So this is a grounded theory study of 17 interracial and intercultural couples. And what it resulted in was concrete, strength-based clinical moves. The focus is not what's wrong, but what helps. And this is in moment to moment and across contexts. So the authors asks, how do couples work across differences in everyday life? The lens is strength-based and process-focused, giving us language and practices to scaffold resilience rather than just assess risk. Think constructionist and ecological. Meaning is co-made and context matters, from the couple system through family and community to societal narratives and historical time. Participants noticed race most vividly in interaction with others. Cultural practices were negotiated inside the relationship. Interviews were joint with brief individual follow-ups. Analysis moved from line-by-line coding to focused categories in a relational process model we can map onto practice. These 4 structures are organized patterns, not moral rankings. Each invites different clinical priorities: protecting individuality, build islands of integration, confirm agency and reciprocity, or slow down to build safety. Couples stabilize by cultivating a coherent we, shared laughter, overlapping values, rituals that signal us. Clinically, help partners name the we moves they already use and script new ones for predictable pinch points such as holidays, finances, or parenting. You want to reframe difference from chronic threat to shared resource. Many couples decenter difference within the bond. and they lean into curiosity, trying on practices, learning language, and celebrating in small weekly acts and major milestones. Outside bias and inside differences can trigger insecurity. Thriving couples narrate feelings directly, validate impact, and adapt conflict styles so both can stay engaged. Encourage support networks so stress doesn't get displaced onto the relationship. Race showed up most with others, so couples practiced standing together. Rehearse boundary scripts and ally signals such as eye contact, a hand squeeze, and a phrase like, "We've got this," for family gatherings, schools, and public spaces. Intervene to fit the structure. Integration can slip into self-erasure. Guard against that. Coexisting couples need visible we zones. In assimilation, confirm it's chosen, not coerced, and cultivate balanced give and take. For unresolved patterns, slow down, build safety, and work this cycle before hot topics. Work multiple layers. In the dyad, formalize rituals and repairs. That's in the microsystem. With families in the meso, plan introductions, holidays, and identify allies. In the exo and macro, in community and institutions, map supports and prepare for school and work moments. Then throughout time, that's the chrono, reassess at life transitions. You want to also avoid extremes, making difference everything or nothing. Balance accommodations so resentment doesn't accrue. After outside prejudice, root anger at the context, not the partner. Hold a both and. Love transcends difference, and difference leaves traces we'll keep tending. Then just to finish off here, some limitations in the research. This was context specific, so it was small California, relatively educated sample. It was cross-sectional, so there was no comparison really. It was not a satisfaction study. But here we still gain a practical process map, and it invites longitudinal, broader region or SES and parenting specific research next.